Welcome to the Beyond Pain podcast with your hosts, Joe Gambino and Joe LaVacca. Join the two Joes, two physical therapists, as they discuss how to navigate the uncertainties of pain so you can move beyond it and get back to the activities you love most. This podcast is for Joe, and their guests to share their clinical thoughts and ideas based on their collective clinical experiences. Can this information be for you? Maybe, but we cannot know for sure. Therefore, it is always worth talking to your healthcare provider to make the best decisions in your care before you implement anything on this podcast. And please use common sense.
Welcome back to the Beyond Pain podcast. I am one of your hosts, Joe Gambino. I'm here with our other host, Joe LaVacca. Find us on Instagram at Joe Gambino DPT for myself, at Strength and Motion _PT for LaVacca over there. You can find us on Instagram as far as the podcast goes, Beyond Pain Podcast. And if you want to watch along, YouTube, Cups of Joe _PT. Welcome back, Joey boy.
It is good to be back. And looking forward to chatting with you again. And I know that we'll be bringing lots of that's our new motto, actionable steps on the podcast.
Actionable step.
Yeah.
This episode, I have a question for you. May not have distinct checklist of action here for you, but
trick question.
Not so much, but maybe it's more of a mindset question around recovery. Okay. So we're switching theme here just slightly from last week.
Okay.
And so the question was actually posed by a client of mine as we were talking, and I'll frame you a little bit here, where she's doing better, a lot of upper back pain, tightness, some discomfort, especially around like one particular spinal segment, like if you put pressure on it. They do much better, can sit much longer. Overall, just symptoms are down, but still like pops up and still she just came over like off of like a week and a half flare up. And in our conversation, what we found out is even though this flare up was here, it recovered quicker than it typically has in the past for her. And she is able to still do more, like sitting no longer bothers her and things like that, which was not like in the beginning, it was like 20 minutes of sitting would be like pain really starting to like radiate and spread from that one spot outwards. And so her question is the hard part for her is that she doesn't know if she's making progress because she's still having flare-ups. She's still having some pain. And so how are you approaching conversations like that? How are you letting them know, or what can somebody think about when they're going through a journey and they still have flare-ups and they still have pain to help them really realize that they're making progress? And she doesn't understand like, okay, like I see like some of these other things are happening and like I am getting better. But when these flare-ups happen, it's like, oh man, like, am I truly getting better?
Yeah.
How are you approaching that?
Well, the first thing I would say is that it's always worth revisiting or confirming that we're both on the same page with what progress is. That's number one. And I think that when people come in on day 1 versus day 10 versus day 100, their perception of progress is probably changing, even if we're not having that direct conversation with them. And in day 1, it might be, I can't even sit without pain. And then now, a month later, whatever, she's sitting and she's fine without pain. But now it shifts to, well, but I can't even run without pain. And I can't even lift without pain. And I can't even do this without pain. So clearly the progress marker for her is pain. Okay, which is okay. That's fine. Like not a big deal. I'm not going to tell her she can't have a progress marker for pain. However, looking at it from a fact-based perspective, we're just kind of taking the big picture. You're able to do more activities over the last few weeks, even in the presence of pain. And you're seeing how your ceiling is shifting. So first of all, does she realize that sitting is a lot less demanding than, say, walking? Walking is a lot less demanding than running. Running might be at or about the same as lifting, depending on what you're doing and your intensity. Maybe it's positional. Hey, we're seeing that you're getting pain every time you go to the gym when you squat, or every time it's Wednesday and you have that big meeting at work. So I think always checking in with what progress means, weekly, monthly. I mean, it could be session to session with some folks, especially if their pain has gotten better. Like if you've been dealing with pain for a really long time, one thing I've realized is that if you get a little bit of hope and you start to feel better, my next conversation with a lot of people is, what can I do now? What should I be doing now? And it's like, well, hold on. It's only been 5 days. Like, I'm glad that you feel better, but I don't know if this is just how your pain would have ebbed and flowed anyway. So let's just stick to the plan. The second thing that I'd probably visit with her is that flares are happening to you, not to the spot in your back. So what else is going on in your life at the time the flares are happening? Is there work issues? Are there spousal issues? Are there nutritional issues? We spent a whole week last week
Mm.
talking about nutrition and what does that mean and what are opportunities around that. So when we're thinking of the flare, I know it's really easy to hone back in on that one spot on your back and be like, oh man, like this tissue, this structure, this disc, this bone got really, really aggravated. But it could just be that your system got sensitized again. So, regardless of what you were doing that day, how long you were sitting, how long you were running, this was going to happen because there's an opportunity potentially that we're missing, or potentially that we talked about and then maybe weren't giving enough priority to. Because our lists as clinicians, I think, change and shift as well, just as people's perceptions of their progress change. If I gave you, 3 lifestyle recommendations, 4 exercises, a list on how to sleep better, and then 2 recommendations to talk to a therapist to help you with your spousal issues at home, where do you start? So it has to be agreed upon that, hey, we started here. Maybe it was with movement, maybe it was with breath, maybe it was stress management, because we both thought that that was going to give you the most bang for your buck.
Mhm.
However, we never said that the other things didn't matter. We just agreed to start here.
Sure.
So now that you have those systems in place and we look at our sort of like chessboard here, what's the next move that makes the most sense to you? And let's see if I can help you.
Mhm.
If it's, spousal stuff or nutrition stuff, well, hey, yeah, given my history, maybe I can help you with both. I know enough to be dangerous with both. But if it's something really deep, then you need to go talk to someone, or you need a coach, or you need
Sure.
a dietitian, right? Maybe that's the next step. So let's keep our program going, your lifting, your breathing, your mobilizations, your whatever, running progression. And in the meantime, why don't next week, instead of you coming back to see me, just go see and talk to the therapist, see what they
Yeah.
have to say. Talk to the dietitian, see what they have to say. You're still doing our program though. We're not subtracting. We're trying to move pieces around to see which is going to give you the most bang for your buck based on your goals.
Yep.
How did you go about handling that conversation?
Well, I'm going to ask you one more question here
Oh,
before we talk about it, because I do like what you said, and I love the question around what progress means, and especially like talking about like it's more of a sensitized system versus this particular structure is just bad, right? It's a bad
yeah,
boy,
right,
and it's
right.
causing you some issues. For this particular person, the pain seems to have no rhyme or reason when these
Hmm.
flares happen, right? Like we aren't able to identify this activity, this stressor, this change in her day, whatever it is. And I
Mhm.
think that's part of what lends to when the pain does pick up like that, like, and it's more so during these flares. Like she just had this like week and a half of like high level of pain, hard to bring it down, and it becomes mentally taxing in a sense,
Mhm.
right? Where like disrupts mood and energy, so it impacts life when these flares happen. So when we don't have a real you do X and it
Mhm.
drives this sensitization, and it almost seems to happen for unperceived reasons, does that change the questions and the way you go about it?
No, it maybe depend on how interested they are in possible explanations. And I
Mm,
think that
I like that.
from what I recall and reading about even nerve firing patterns is they're spontaneous, right? I mean, the neurons in our brains are spontaneously making connections. Those connections are living entities. The thought pattern of where you live or where I live is a neuronal connection. Your pain is a neuronal connection. Your emotions, your sadness, your happiness, whatever. These are all connections that will make or break depending on the day or just because they are literally always seeking connection. So obviously, we can't control the billions of neurons and firing patterns in our brain, but realize that they are trying to survive
Mm.
just like you and I. Right. For them, their world is, hey, the more connections and builds I can make, the more solidified I am and the more likely I have a chance to be here. Your outer nerves will sometimes just shoot off chemicals and hormones too for any number of reasons. I mean, moving my elbow might have been enough to cause my shoulder pain because I needed nerve firing patterns to move my elbow. And that could have been enough for that day to just move me over a threshold. And now my shoulder hurts again. And I think in those situations, the affirmations are really important. And I've had 2 clients recently where I've really encouraged them to either write this down on their phone, open up their CoachRx app, and read it either out loud to themselves or over and over again. This is just a flare. I am safe. I have been here before, and I know this will get better, right? This is a flare. I am safe. I have been here before, and I
It's
know
like
that this
the
will get better.
Simpsons back-to-back weeks, Joe. You just write it on that
Exactly.
chalkboard over and over again.
Over and over and over again. And you have to believe it, right? And the one thing that often helps people believe that, and I may have touched on this a few times, and I bring it up often week to week with clients, is the double standard. If your husband, spouse, child was going through the same thing, what would you tell them? Would you look at that sentence and is that something that you would speak to them? Yes. Okay. So if you would tell it to them, you have to believe it deep down, right?
Uh-huh.
Or else why would you lie to your child, your spouse, your best friend, your mom, your dad? That doesn't seem like you. So if you would extend that information as truth, then you have to receive it yourself as truth. And then there might be a quote unquote buyout, right? So you say this affirmation. Sometimes that might be the only thing you can do. You're in a meeting, you're in a work call, you're on the train, right? There's nothing that you can do. But when you are capable of doing anything that you enjoy, that's your buyout. It could be reading a book for 3 minutes. It could be listening to your favorite song. It could be going for a walk outside around the block. It doesn't have to be something where you're like, okay, get down, do your hip circles, stretch your hip for 3.5 minutes. Oh, remember the isometrics I taught you? Remember that like breathing pattern I taught you? Right? Sometimes those things will be accessible. But a lot of times without these connected patterns, we're going to need something a little bit different, more that you can do any place, anytime. And that could be just walking. That could be popping in your AirPods and putting on your favorite song. That could be listening to a podcast. That could be reading a book. Whatever the case is, find something that you enjoy and makes you realize that you can still have your identity.
Mhm.
And then keep repeating the mantra.
I like that. I think maybe not in this particular case, but I think there are cases that I've had where moving and shifting to the something you enjoy philosophy sometimes in like certain cases can be better than the let's shift to the let's try these exercises and see what you can do with pain, because sometimes pain is the problem in a sense, and constantly like checking in with symptoms I think sometimes can make things harder for some people, and certain especially
Sure.
in certain parts of their journey. So I really like the idea of like, can you do something you can enjoy that can either distract you from what's going on or help you feel a little bit better in the meantime, that is absent of how can I play around with the area or play around with movement and then pray at the end of it that I feel a little bit better. Right.
Right.
And then I think also just like enjoyment in, like sometimes pain can really put you down like a really big rabbit hole of like despair. And I think pulling in things that you really enjoy can help kind of pull you out of it as well. So
Yeah,
I do
sure.
like that a lot.
Hey, unless you like your hip stretches and your
Yeah.
mobilizations and your hip circles and whatever, then yeah, go do them. But a lot of people are doing those things because they believe they have to, or they believe they should, or they believe like that's the only way to make themselves feel better. And I think that when we reinforce that message, we're reinforcing the idea that, yeah, you're right. This is happening to your hip. This is the hip tissue. This is the hip capsule. This is the hip muscle. So you need to work the hip muscle. And when we accept that pain's that broader approach, well, now look at how many more options we have to help you cope with it in the moment.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a great point because I mean, we both believe, right? Like pain is not necessarily just, I mean, it can certainly be tissue specific, right? But it can also not be at the same time. So very good. I think this was a very, very useful conversation that will help a lot of people, I think, if they're struggling to understand if progress is happening from because pain continues to linger around throughout the process.
Yeah, that's our new motto, actionable steps. Every
That's it.
podcast now.
Look at that. I didn't think we were going to have an actionable step, but here we go.
All right, man.
We
Well,
got
as
a few.
always,
Get yourself a chalkboard, put it in in every room of your house, and make sure 100 times a day you write down your affirmations.
yeah. Hey, look, until you believe it, until you get the tattoo on your forearm, the chalkboard will have to do. Well, Joe, we love you, listeners. We love you. Thank you for listening again, and don't forget to come back next week for another exciting, actionable episode of the Beyond Pain podcast.